day, everyone. My name is Maryann, and I'm really happy to be with you today. We're going to start learning how to make a 12.5 inch, which will be a 12 inch when it's finished and put into a quilter project, Whirlwind block. And this is what it looks like. Very easy block to make, and I think it looks pretty fun. Okay. This is not actually recommended to put in a sampler quilt, only because the wings of the windmill aren't going to match up with another block. Although I've seen a quilt made with just this block and it looked terrific. To get you started, you're going to need 2 pieces of fabric that complement each other. Usually you do a lighter and a darker, and sometimes they call the lighter one a solid and the other one a print. Both of mine have a little bit of a print on it. You're going to take your width of the fabric and you're going to cut a 5-inch piece all the way across the width of the fabric. And you do that with the one color and then you do it with the other color. Then you sew those 2 strips together using a 1/4 inch seam. That's over here. Now you're going to subcut that strip into 9.5 inch squares. So you're going to have a 9.5 inch square with the plain fabric on top and the design fabric you need. Then you're going to slice each one from one corner to the other. The really important thing to note about that is you need to slice all of your blocks in the same direction. You can't do this one this way and the other one this way. They all have to be the same way. If you're doing right to left, it's right to left, or left to right. You have to do them all the same. Actually, when you do this pattern, you'll see in the end you end up making 2 blocks. One will look like that, and one will kind of look like this one that we're going to put together as a group. So you'll have the alternating blocks. So you get 2 blocks out of that strip. After you do this and you're cutting this, you'll have the 2 triangles. Actually, you're going to have more than 2 because you're going to have, once we hit this, you'll have 4. And this, whatever way you cut determines the way that the windmill is going to spin around. You're going to take these triangles and you're going to separate them into 2 groups. This would be one group and this would be the other group. You see the windmill paddles are this way and this one is the yellow gold. So you're going to separate them into the 2 groups and then you will sew 2 of them together, right like that. And you'll do the same thing with the other 2 and then you just join the 2 halves together and you've got your pinwheel. Very easy, very interesting looking block. So I have these already cut. I'm going to go ahead and sew these 2 together, and then I'm going to sew these together, and then we'll join them. You always use a 1/4 inch seam, and I have a 1/4 inch foot, which is a wonderful foot to have because you just run your fabric right along the edge, and you don't have to worry about whether it's a 1/4 inch. Okay, my first 2 triangles are sewn together. Sew the next 2 together. This block that I'm sewing now was made from that same 2 strips that were sewn together. We created that one block that I already sewed before the class, and now we have this other block that I'm sewing. So you get 2 blocks out of the one set of directions. Okay, now that I have them sewn, I'm going to set the seam by pressing it while it's closed. And then I'm going to open it up and press it towards well, they tell you the dark side. Both sides are about the same. I'm going to press it towards this side because there's less seams there. There's a seam here. So I'm going to press it towards this side. Snip these threads. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Snip the seams. Trim this thread here. And again, there's a seam here, so I'm going to press it this way, away from that extra seam. Okay, now we have our 2 halves. So the only thing that's left for us to do, actually, you know what, the only thing that's left for us to do is sew these 2 halves together. But I was just looking, and the way I press these, both of the seams are going to the same direction. I want them to alternate so there's no bunching up. So I'm going to go ahead and re-iron this one to make it the other direction. This one's this way, this one's going to go this way. Actually, it was going that way until it looks like I pressed it a little bit differently. If you have a stubborn seam, this best press makes it nice and crisp, and it kind of keeps it in place. Okay. Now I believe, yep, they're going in opposite directions. You don't need to pin this. I do like to pin it though because of the length of the fabric. I like to nestle those seams. You can almost feel when they're in the right place. You butt one up against the other. And I will pin it. And now I'm going to check to make sure it looks like the seams are going to match. And it does. And I'm going to take it to the sewing machine. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam. You want to be careful to not sew under your pin because it will definitely break your needle. Okay, I'm going to set the seam. And now I'm going to open it up. And it really doesn't matter which side you press it to because they're equally the same. And as you can see, my center seam matched really well. I was lucky this time. It doesn't always work out like that. Let me check the back. Okay. So you'll see that all the seams are pressed to the same direction. They're not folded upon themselves. You don't want any bulk there. Okay, well, what's left to do now is to trim off all these little dog ears, I call them, all those little pieces that are sticking out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. You could use scissors, but I tend to use my rotary cutter for everything. And here is your completed whirlwind block. And this one here were made from the same 2 strips of fabric sewn together by the width of the fabric. And you can make the 2 blocks, and you even have a little tiny bit left over. So here you go, you have 2 alternating blocks. And this is what I was telling you, if you try to put it with, well actually if you try to put it with this one, it works out okay. But if you try to put it with another type of block, the midsection is not going to be in the middle. This would make a really nice quilt actually. If you were using them in a sampler quilt, you might want to put a little bit of sashing around each side because they're not going to match up with your other block. They also make a cute little table topper, put a fabric in the back, and you could put some kind of inner facing, you could put flannel, you could use anything. You don't have to. You could just, sew it around. If you want to put a design, you could do stitch in the ditch, which would be stitching along the seam line, or you could do it like maybe an echo thing, an inch away from the seams. There's lots of things you can do with this block, and I think it's a really easy block to make, and it's really a very pretty block. So I think you could get a lot of uses out of this. You could use it for the front of a bag or a purse, or not a purse, I guess, a bag. Or you could put like 2 or 3 of them together and make a little table runner. Thank you for joining me today. Hope you enjoyed this tutorial on the Whirlwind Block.